My name is Marcus Hayes, and I'm 47 years old. I spent my entire life working on my father's ranch in Wyoming, 5,000 acres of prime cattle land worth approximately $50 million. My older brother Carter and I both grew up on this land, but only one of us was ever considered the heir. Dad always made it clear that Carter was his successor. Carter was the golden child, strong, charismatic, aggressive in all the ways Dad admired. I was different. I preferred the quieter work of ranch management, kept detailed records, maintained relationships with buyers, handled the finances Dad found tedious. Dad saw this as weakness rather than complementary skill. When Dad died last year at 76, the will reading confirmed what I'd always known. Carter inherited everything: the ranch, the cattle, the equipment, the house, all $50 million worth. I received one item, Dad's old garden hoe, a rusted tool he'd used for 40 years, worth maybe $5 at a yard sale. The lawyer who read the will looked uncomfortable as he handed me that hoe. Carter didn't even pretend to feel bad. He just grinned and said something about it being fitting since I'd always preferred digging in dirt to real ranch work. The insult wasn't even accurate. I'd done every job on that ranch, from branding cattle to fixing machinery. But accuracy didn't matter to Carter. I walked out of that lawyer's office carrying a worthless hoe, my inheritance from decades of labor. I had no home anymore. The ranch house belonged to Carter now. I had no job. Carter made it clear I wasn't welcome to stay on as an employee. At 47 years old, I was essentially homeless and jobless, holding a rusty farming tool as my only asset from a lifetime of work. I spent that first night in a cheap motel in town, staring at the hoe propped against the wall. It seemed like Dad's final insult, not just leaving me nothing, but leaving me something deliberately worthless, a slap disguised as inheritance. I picked it up, examining it closely for the first time. It was indeed old, the wooden handle worn smooth by decades of use, the metal blade rusted and pitted. But as I turned it over, something caught my eye. Carved into the wood near the bottom, barely visible under years of grime and wear, were initials. M.H., my initials. Marcus Hayes. Why would Dad carve my initials into his favorite hoe? I cleaned the handle carefully, revealing more carvings. There were dates: 1975, 1980, 1985, years from my childhood, and words, partially obscured but readable once I knew to look. For Marcus, always. The discovery made no sense. If Dad cared enough to carve this, why leave me with nothing else? Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, I kept turning the hoe over, searching for more clues. Near the blade, I found another carving, this one more deliberate. Barn, northwest, third beam. It was cryptic but clearly intentional. Dad had left me a message. The next morning, I drove back to the ranch. Carter's truck was gone. He'd mentioned something about meeting with investors about selling off portions of the land. I parked near the old barn, the massive structure where Dad had spent countless hours. Security wasn't an issue yet. Carter hadn't changed locks or hired guards. He probably didn't think I'd dare come back. The barn smelled of hay and leather and cattle, familiar scents that brought unexpected tears. I'd learned to ride in this barn, helped birth calves, fixed equipment beside Dad, even though he rarely praised my work. Now it all belonged to Carter. I found the northwest corner and counted the beams. The third one was high up, requiring a ladder to reach. I climbed carefully, running my hands along the rough wood. At first, I felt nothing unusual. Then my fingers caught on something, a gap in the wood, a carved-out hiding space covered with a fitted piece that blended seamlessly with the beam. I pried it open. Inside was a metal box about the size of a shoebox, sealed against moisture and dust. My hands shook as I brought it down. The box was locked, but not well. A simple padlock that I broke open with tools from the barn. Inside were papers, lots of them. And the more I read, the more my world tilted on its axis. The first document was a deed, not for the main ranch, but for a separate property, 1,200 acres about 30 miles north, bordering the national forest. The deed was in my name, dated 23 years ago when I was 24. Dad had purchased it quietly, never mentioned it, and registered it to me. The land had been leased to a logging company for years, generating income that went into a trust also in my name. I found bank statements next. The trust had been accumulating logging lease payments for over 2 decades, with interest and careful investment handled by a financial advisor whose name I didn't recognize. It had grown substantially. The most recent statement showed a balance of $800,000. I sat on the barn floor, documents scattered around me, trying to comprehend. Dad hadn't left me with nothing. He'd left me with something significant, something Carter didn't know about. But why hide it? Why make it seem like he'd given me only a worthless hoe? More papers provided answers. Letters, written in Dad's handwriting but never sent, explained everything. The letters were addressed to me, dated over the past 15 years. Dad had written them but never delivered them, storing them instead in this secret box. I read them with growing emotion, each one revealing truths I'd never known. "Marcus," the first letter began, "by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've spent your whole life being harder on you than Carter, and you probably think I loved you less. That's not true. I was harder on you because you were stronger. Carter needs the ranch. It's all he's capable of. But you could do anything. You have a mind for business, a heart for fairness, skills beyond cattle ranching. I couldn't let you waste that by staying here under Carter's shadow." Another letter explained the hidden property. "I bought this land for you when you turned 24. I saw how you worked, how you planned, how you thought beyond the next season. You deserve something of your own. But if I gave it to you openly, Carter would have found a way to take it. He's my son and I love him, but I know his nature. So I kept it secret, knowing you were smart enough to find it when the time came." A third letter broke my heart. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you I was proud of you. Every time I tried, Carter was nearby, and praising you meant dealing with his jealousy and rage. It was easier to stay silent than to face his tantrums. That was cowardice on my part. You deserved better. You deserved to hear that you were valued, skilled, and loved. I failed you there, son, but I tried to make it right in the only way I knew how, by giving you a foundation for independence." The final letter, dated just weeks before Dad's death, was the most emotional. "The hoe has your initials because I carved them when you were 5 years old. You followed me everywhere, wanted to help with everything. I told you someday you'd inherit this tool. I meant it differently than you'll think when you first receive it." Dad's final letter continued. "The hoe represents honest work, the kind you've always done. Carter wants the glory and the wealth, but you understand that real value comes from what you build with your own hands. The hoe will lead you to what I've built for you, not an empire that will make you lazy, but a foundation that will make you independent. Use it well, son. Make me proud. You always have." I sat there crying, something I hadn't done since childhood. Dad had loved me. He'd planned for me. He'd given me exactly what I needed, not what I wanted. Carter got the ranch that would define and limit him. I got freedom and a future of my own making. But reading those letters also sparked anger. Dad could have told me these things while alive. He could have shown me the property, explained his plans, given me the security of knowing I mattered to him. Instead, he'd let me spend decades thinking I was the disappointment, the lesser son, the one not worth acknowledging. I gathered all the documents, put them back in the box, and climbed down from the barn. As I reached the ground, I heard a vehicle approaching. Carter's truck pulled up and my brother climbed out, his expression shifting from surprise to anger when he saw me. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. "This is private property, my property." I held up the metal box. "Just collecting something Dad left me." Carter's eyes narrowed, focusing on the box. "What's that?" "Nothing that concerns you. Just some personal papers. If it came from this ranch, it concerns me. Everything here is mine now." Carter stepped closer, his posture aggressive. He'd always been bigger than me, used his size to intimidate when arguments didn't go his way. "Hand it over." I held the box tighter. "No, this is mine. Dad left it specifically for me. Dad left you a hoe. A worthless piece of junk, nothing else. Carter's face reddened. Now give me that box or I'll take it. Try it. Something in my voice made Carter pause. I'd never challenged him physically before, had always walked away from confrontations. But I was 47 years old, tired of backing down and holding proof that I'd been valued all along. That changed something fundamental in me. Carter studied me, calculating. Fine, keep your box of trash, but you're trespassing. Get off my property. Gladly. I have no reason to come back here. I walked to my truck, placed the box carefully in the passenger seat, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Carter standing there, suspicious but not worried. He had no idea what I'd found. The next week, I met with the property manager who'd been handling my land for 2 decades. James Thornton was a man in his 60s, professional and discreet. He'd been following Dad's instructions without ever contacting me directly, waiting for this meeting that Dad had predicted would eventually happen. Your father was very specific, James explained in his office. He told me that when you came asking about the property, it meant he'd passed and you'd found the documents. He said you'd know what to do with it. Tell me about the land. James pulled out maps and reports. 1,200 acres of primarily forested land, bordering the national forest to the north. It's been leased to Rocky Mountain Timber for 22 years. The lease expires next year. The company has expressed strong interest in renewing, but that's your decision now. The land itself has appreciated significantly. Comparable properties in that area are selling for around $12,000 per acre. I did the math quickly. Nearly $15 million. The trust currently holds $847,000, James continued. Your father instructed minimal draws, only what was needed for property taxes and management fees. He wanted it to grow for you. Additionally, the timber company pays $60,000 annually for the lease. That income could continue, or you could explore other options. My mind spun with possibilities. I had land worth $15 million, nearly $1 million in liquid assets, and ongoing income potential. Dad hadn't left me with nothing. He'd left me with freedom and choice. What would you recommend? I asked. James leaned back. That depends on what you want. You could sell the land, take the $15 million, and invest it elsewhere. You could renew the timber lease and continue collecting passive income, or you could develop it. That land has potential for recreational use, hunting leases, even selective residential development given its location. I thought about Carter's ranch, the massive operation that required constant work, constant stress, constant presence. Dad had given him a golden cage. He'd given me wings. I want to see the property first before deciding anything. James smiled. I hoped you'd say that. I can take you tomorrow. The next day, we drove north into the mountains. The property was stunning. Rolling forested hills, meadows full of wildlife, streams running clear and cold. At the northern boundary, the land transitioned into the national forest, meaning my property had millions of acres of protected wilderness as its backyard. No development could ever spoil that view. There's something else, James said, as we stood overlooking a particularly beautiful valley. Your father left a letter with me, separate from the others. He said to give it to you after you'd seen the land. He handed me an envelope. Inside, Dad's handwriting covered 2 pages. Marcus, if you're reading this, you're standing on your land. When I bought this, I imagined you building here. Not a massive ranch like mine. Not an operation that would consume your life, Dad's letter continued, but a home, a place of peace. You always saw things differently, appreciated beauty, valued quiet, found joy in simple moments. Carter needs empire. You need sanctuary. This land can be whatever you want. Sell it and invest in a different dream. Develop it carefully and create something unique, or simply build a cabin and live quietly. The choice is yours, son. That's my real gift. Choice. Carter gets the ranch and the burden of maintaining it. You get freedom. I folded the letter carefully, looking out over the valley. Dad had understood me better than I'd realized. He'd known that giving me the ranch would have trapped me just as surely as giving me nothing. This was perfect. Over the next month, I made decisions. I would keep the land, but shift how it was used. I negotiated with the timber company. They could continue their lease on 600 acres, reduced from the full 1,200, at an increased rate of 80,000 annually. The remaining 600 acres I would develop carefully for high-end hunting and fishing leases. With James's help, I found consultants who specialized in sustainable outdoor recreation. The plan was simple: build a modest lodge, establish ethical hunting practices, create fishing access to the streams, and charge premium prices for exclusive experiences. The market research showed strong demand. Wealthy professionals would pay $15,000 for a week-long guided hunt in pristine wilderness. I used $300,000 from the trust to fund the development. Within 9 months, the lodge was complete. A beautiful timber structure that blended into the landscape, with 6 guest cabins, a main dining hall, and guide quarters. We hired local guides who knew the land, a chef who specialized in wild game, and a manager who'd run similar operations. The business launched in the fall hunting season. We booked solid for the first year, generating $400,000 in revenue with healthy profit margins. Meanwhile, back at the old ranch, Carter was struggling. He'd borrowed heavily against the property to buy out some neighboring land, expecting prices to keep rising. Instead, cattle prices dropped. A drought hit the region, forcing him to buy expensive feed. The massive operation required staff he could barely afford, equipment that kept breaking down, and management skills he didn't possess. He'd inherited $50 million worth of assets and somehow was going broke. I heard this through mutual acquaintances in town. Part of me felt satisfaction at his struggles, karma for a lifetime of arrogance and cruelty. But another part, the part that remembered we were brothers despite everything, felt something closer to pity. One afternoon, about 18 months after Dad's death, Carter showed up at my lodge. I was in the main building reviewing bookings with the manager when I saw his truck pull up. He climbed out, looking older than his 50 years, stress etched into every line of his face. "Marcus," he said when I stepped outside, "can we talk?" I nodded, leading him to a bench overlooking the valley. We sat in silence for a moment. 2 brothers who'd barely spoken in years, brought together by circumstances neither expected. "This place is beautiful," Carter said finally. "You built this?" "With Dad's help. Turns out he left me more than just a hoe." Carter's jaw tightened. "I heard something about that. Found out you owned land up here. Didn't realize it was this extensive or this successful." Dad kept it quiet. From both of us, actually. I only found out after he died. When I followed clues, he left. Clues? Carter laughed bitterly. "Of course. Dad always was better at indirect communication." He rubbed his face. "I'm drowning, Marcus. The ranch is killing me. Debt, drought, equipment failures. I can't keep up." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? After everything?" Carter looked at me. "I was a bastard to you our whole lives. I know that." The admission surprised me. Carter had never acknowledged his behavior before, had always acted as though his treatment of me was justified or normal. Hearing him admit fault was unexpected and, despite my lingering resentment, meaningful. "Yes, you were," I said honestly. "You made my life difficult whenever possible. You took credit for my work, undermined me with Dad, and enjoyed watching me struggle." "I know." Carter's voice was quiet. "I was jealous. You were smarter, better with people, more capable at almost everything. Dad saw it, even if he didn't say it. I felt threatened, so I compensated by being cruel." "That's not an excuse." "No, it's not. It's just an explanation." Carter stared at his hands. "I came here to ask for help. I need a loan to save the ranch. But I realize I have no right to ask you for anything. I could have said yes. I had the money, could have written a check that would solve Carter's immediate problems. I could have been the bigger person, shown grace, proved I was better than his past cruelty. Instead, I said, 'You're right, you have no right to ask me for anything, and I'm not going to give you money.'" Carter nodded, unsurprised. "Fair enough. I'll figure something out." Probably sell off sections of the ranch, try to get ahead of the debt. That's one option. Here's another. I turned to face him fully. I'll buy half the ranch from you, $7 million. That gives you capital to pay your debts, invest in proper equipment and hire competent management. In exchange, I become your partner. Equal say in decisions, equal share of profits or losses. Carter's eyes widened. Why would you do that? Because despite everything, we're brothers. Because that ranch has 3 generations of our family's work in it, and because I think with proper management, which I can provide, it could be profitable again. The partnership agreement took 3 months to finalize. Lawyers drafted documents that protected both our interests, established clear decision-making processes, and outlined responsibilities. I contributed $7 million. Carter contributed the ranch itself. We were equal partners now, regardless of how we'd started. The arrangement changed everything. I brought financial discipline Carter had always lacked: budgets, cost analysis, strategic planning. Carter brought hands-on ranching expertise and relationships with other cattlemen. Together, we were more effective than either alone. I didn't move back to the ranch. I kept my lodge in the mountains, managed that business remotely, and visited the ranch weekly for partnership meetings. The distance was important. I needed my own space, my own success, separate from the family legacy. Over the next 2 years, the ranch stabilized and then thrived. We diversified beyond just cattle, adding hay production and equipment leasing. We invested in technology that reduced labor costs. We built relationships with premium beef buyers who paid more for quality. Profit margins improved dramatically. Carter changed during this time. Having to work as a partner rather than an owner softened some of his arrogance. He started asking for my input instead of dismissing it. He acknowledged his limitations and let me handle the areas where I excelled. We weren't close. Too much history stood between us, but we developed respect. One evening, about 3 years after Dad's death, Carter and I sat on the ranch house porch after a long day working cattle. The sun was setting over the fields, painting everything gold. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't appreciated before, when this place had represented only work and unappreciation. "I think Dad knew what he was doing," Carter said suddenly. "What do you mean?" "Leaving me the ranch, leaving you the mysterious hoe that led to something better. He gave each of us what we needed, not what we wanted. I considered this. Maybe. Or maybe he just knew that fairness isn't always about equal division. It's about giving each person what allows them to thrive. You're thriving more than me. Your lodge is wildly successful, and now you own half the ranch that's finally profitable. I got the burden. You got the opportunity. You could see it that way, or you could see that Dad gave you something to fight for, something to learn from. You're a better rancher now than 3 years ago. More humble, more strategic, more willing to adapt. That growth had value. Carter absorbed this. Still, I was wrong about you, about a lot of things, and I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. You deserved better from me. Yes, I did, but we're here now. That matters too." We sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Crickets started their evening song. The ranch continued its eternal cycle, seasons passing, work never truly done. But now I was part of it by choice, not obligation. That made all the difference. My lodge continued to grow. By the 5th year, we'd expanded to 10 cabins, added a spa service, and started hosting corporate retreats alongside our hunting and fishing operations. Annual revenue exceeded $1 million. I'd become a respected figure in outdoor recreation, speaking at conferences and consulting for other properties. The land Dad left me, the hidden gift he'd secured decades ago, had become the foundation for success that exceeded even his expectations. I often thought about those letters in the barn, the care he'd taken to plan for my future, even while appearing not to care at all. I came to understand that Dad's love had been complicated, expressed through action rather than words, through long-term planning rather than immediate affection. It wasn't the kind of love I'd wanted as a child, but it was real, and it had given me exactly what I needed. 7 years after Dad's death, I married. Her name was Rebecca, a wildlife biologist I'd hired to help establish sustainable hunting practices on my land. She understood the mountains, loved the outdoors, and appreciated the life I'd built. We married in a small ceremony on the lodge property, with Carter in attendance looking genuinely happy for me. Carter himself had found stability. He'd married a woman named Sarah, who understood ranching and brought her own skills to the operation. They had a daughter, my niece, who I watched grow up with the kind of uncle involvement I'd never had myself. The ranch was finally profitable enough that Carter wasn't constantly stressed. He'd learned to manage within his means, to value quality over expansion, to run a business rather than an empire. The old barn where I'd found Dad's box remained standing. Sometimes when I visited the ranch, I'd walk through it, running my hands along the third beam in the northwest corner. The hiding place was empty now, but the memory remained powerful. That moment when I discovered I wasn't forgotten or undervalued, just understood differently than I'd thought. I kept the old hoe. It hung on the wall in my lodge office, a reminder of where I'd started and what I'd found. Guests sometimes asked about it, such a simple, rustic tool in an otherwise polished space. I'd tell them it was a family heirloom, which was true, though I rarely shared the full story. On the 10th anniversary of Dad's death, Carter and I made a pilgrimage to his grave. We brought flowers, stood silently for a while, then Carter spoke. Do you think he's watching? Seeing how things turned out? I don't know. Maybe. If he is, I hope he's satisfied. The ranch is stable, your business is booming, and we're not killing each other. That's probably more than he expected. I smiled. Probably. Though I think he had faith it would work out. Otherwise, why leave those clues? True, he always did think 10 moves ahead. Carter paused. I wonder what he'd say if he could see us now. He'd probably tell us to stop talking and get back to work. Carter laughed. Yeah, that sounds like him. We stood there a while longer, two brothers who'd taken very different paths that somehow converged into partnership and mutual respect. It wasn't the relationship we'd had as children. That was gone, complicated by years of rivalry and pain. But it was real, built on honesty and shared responsibility. As we walked back to our trucks, Carter turned to me one more time. Thanks for not giving up on me. On us. You could have taken your money and disappeared, let me crash and burn. Would have been justified after how I treated you. Maybe, but Dad didn't give me that land so I could escape family. He gave it to me so I could stand as an equal. That required staying, not leaving. Well, I'm grateful anyway. We shook hands, then drove our separate ways. Carter to the ranch, me to the mountains, both heading home to lives we'd built from the complicated legacy our father left behind. Years continued to pass. My business expanded into consulting for other outdoor recreation properties. Carter's ranch became a model for sustainable cattle operation, frequently featured in agricultural journals. We both found success, different types, but equally meaningful. The story of Dad's hidden inheritance became somewhat famous in our community. People would ask how I'd figured it out, what made me look in the barn, how I'd known to search. I'd tell them about the hoe, the carved initials, the cryptic message. Most found it romantic, a father's love expressed through mystery rather than directness. I understood it differently. Dad hadn't been romantic. He'd been practical and protective, and ultimately wise. He'd known Carter would react poorly to seeing me given anything of value. He'd known that an open gift would have created conflict, possibly violence, definitely resentment that would have poisoned what I received. So he'd hidden it, trusting that I was smart enough to find it and strong enough to use it well. His faith had been justified. I'd found the clues, claimed my inheritance, and built something meaningful from it. More importantly, I'd done so without destroying my relationship with Carter. By appearing to get nothing, I'd avoided his jealousy long enough to establish my own success. By the time Carter learned the truth, I was already beyond his reach or control. Sometimes, I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't found the box. Would Dad have had a backup plan? Would the property manager have eventually contacted me? Or would Dad have accepted that if I couldn't solve his puzzle, I didn't deserve the prize? I'd never know. What I did know was that the journey from humiliation to discovery to success had shaped me in ways a straightforward inheritance never could have. I'd learned I was capable of rebuilding from nothing. I'd learned my worth wasn't determined by what others gave me, but by what I created myself. I'd learned that love sometimes looks like absence, but is actually protection. Rebecca and I had 2 children over the years, a son and a daughter who grew up surrounded by the mountains, learning to appreciate the land and the work it required. I taught them about their grandfather, about the ranch legacy, about the complicated ways family can show love. They knew the story of the hoe, had heard it enough times to roll their eyes at the telling, but I told it anyway. It mattered that they understood where they came from. Carter's daughter and my children became close, cousins who genuinely liked each other. The next generation didn't carry our baggage, didn't replay our rivalries. They simply were family, uncomplicated by the past. Now, at 60 years old, I sit in my lodge office looking at that old hoe and reflecting on the journey it represented. 13 years since Dad died, 13 years since I thought I'd been given nothing and discovered I'd been given everything. The ranch continues successfully under Carter's management, our partnership still solid. My lodge has become a regional destination, written up in travel magazines and outdoor publications. The land Dad bought for me continues to appreciate, now worth more than $20 million in addition to the income it generates. But the real inheritance wasn't the money or the land. It was the lesson that value comes in many forms, that love can be expressed through action rather than words, and that sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones we have to work to discover. I think about young Marcus, 47 and holding a rusted hoe, feeling worthless and forgotten. I wish I could tell him what I know now, that he's standing at the beginning of his best years, that the tool in his hands is a treasure map, that his father loved him more than he could express, but exactly as much as he needed. The hoe hangs on my wall, a reminder of transformation, from symbol of worthlessness to key to fortune, from ending to beginning, from what I thought I deserved to what I was always meant to have. Carter called this morning asking for my input on a potential land purchase adjacent to the ranch. We talked for 30 minutes, debating pros and cons, analyzing finances, making decisions together. When we hung up, I felt something I'd never expected to feel about my brother: partnership. Not just in business, but in spirit. Dad's plan had worked. He'd divided his assets unevenly but perfectly, giving each son exactly what would lead to his growth. Carter got the challenge that would humble and mature him. I got the freedom that would let me build and thrive.